Okay, so today we're going to run through the question that we get asked quite a lot at Ghost Marketing is it possible to buy these high quality or these high DA or DR backlinks without, getting penalized from Google? How does it work? Is there a risk element, a penalization element? Obviously, there's a lot of talk and misinformation in the industry about this topic, so we're just going to cover it quickly now. So obviously there's a lot of talk about links at the moment, especially as sort of SERPs themselves get more competitive and people start to understand technical SEO and on-page optimization a lot better, especially in very specific, highly competitive industries. But if you're brand new, basically without links, you just won't rank anywhere online. Um, there are so many added benefits as well. So things like they build your reputation, they obviously make Google trust you, a valuable source of information. They drive a massive amount of referral traffic, and they obviously boost your domain rating or ranking or authority or however you want to define it. Um, Ultimately, they're building a sustainable organic traffic source for you, which is what we want to get to. Once you have a very high domain rating or domain authority, every new post or every new piece of content or even a commercial service page that you create will rank higher naturally, especially if you start to leverage internal linking and things like this. So in short, they're still incredibly important, even though they have started to become very saturated and done extremely spammy in the industry, even the quote unquote white hat tactics. So just before we get started, we're talking about high DA in this case, but how do we basically define the value of a link? So there's a few different criteria. The obvious one is obviously the authority of the host domain. So you can rate that with DR if you use Ahrefs or DA if you use Moz. We personally recommend Ahrefs as they seem to be the industry leader nowadays, and it's the only tool we use in-house on an hourly basis. Next, you've got relevancy. So essentially, is this relevant to the targets that you're trying to build links to? So if a business blog links to a marketing agency, that makes a lot of sense. But if you get a food blogger linking to a builder or a contractor, that just doesn't make a lot of sense. And as a result, that link isn't going to be worth as much, or it isn't going to be as valuable when it comes to organic rankings inside Google itself. Okay. Then obviously you've got the no follow or do follow status. We always want to build do follow links where possible, although there is some misinformation about how no follow links work. And then finally, anchor text. Usually, if you are unfamiliar with anchor text, it's essentially the clickable part of the link itself. You want to use whatever you're linking to the piece of content as your target keyword, but never repeat an exact match anchor. So there are things like partial match anchors, exact match anchors, branded anchors, and even URLs. So that's where the exact URL is the clickable part of the link. Although this is very basic, you need to basically vary your anchor text dramatically. And if you're unsure or you don't want to get penalized and you want to be 100% clean, anchor text that's basically branded or even 100% natural. So don't say anything. If you're doing outreach, for example, don't say anything what anchor text you want. You'll be pretty much 100% safe. So next we're looking at what actually is domain authority. So who decides this? Now, we've said Google does here, but it's kind of not, because Google has their internal metric for page authority or domain authority, but it's not called authority. Obviously, a decade ago it used to be called PageRank, but they still have that internally, and there's still some sort of PageRank that they use for that algorithm, but it's not obviously public anymore, as of I think even 10 years ago now. So the next best thing we can have are these third-party tools, and honestly, as much as I love Ahrefs, they're still not accurate. They're still not 100% accurate because it's very easy to manipulate DR and DA if you're a Moz user, or TrustFlow for Majestic. It's basically the same thing how they calculate it, but there are obviously internal differences in terms of the metrics that are used, from referring domains, do follow links, relevancy, everything like this. They basically use their own algorithm to crawl the data and give you a figure that lets you easily decide. So if we're looking through a website, or if we're reaching out to a prospect to acquire a link for a client, what we can do is we can put that site into Ahrefs and very quickly get an idea. And that's what we're trying to do here. These numbers are good reference points, but they're not always reliable. Okay, they just help us to get a very, very quick idea. We can have a 5-second look at the website itself. Does it look clean? Is it well designed? Is it unique content? And then we can have a 5-second look inside Ahrefs. Does it have organic traffic? Does it have a decent DR? Does it have some referring domains? And then that allows us to make a 10, 20-second sort of decision on whether that domain is worth targeting for a link for this particular client. And that's why these metrics are super powerful. They just let us analyze it a lot faster. And even though they're not perfect, they are kind of the best we have in our industry at the moment. Essentially, DA does matter as well because when you talk about these metrics, they're distilled from numerous other metrics. So things like spam score, original content, traffic, social sharing, etc., etc. And although they're not directly related from things like social, the DA or the overall authority, if you're super spammed, it will go down. Okay, so there's a good metric on Majestic. So they have their trust flow and their citation flow. If you're only looking at trust flow, then a trust flow website of say 15 or 20 might be perceived as not very powerful. But if the citation flow is very, very high, then it's more powerful, but it's less trusted. So in this case, they position it as they're not sure if this is a trusted website, if it may have been spammed in the past. Okay, so for example, a backlink from livestrong.com tells Google that your website has some really great information about the health, medicine, active lifestyle niches, but it also might, Google doesn't know if you've achieved that through a specific method. And that's why the higher editorial sites that me and other marketing agencies can't just approach and acquire within a day are seen as the top links and the most valuable ones because they have the editorial wall in place. Okay. So, to the point of the article, is it possible? Yes, of course. Should you do it? Not unless you know what you're doing, is going to be pretty much what we say to people nowadays. If you've been in the link industry for, a year, then you probably have enough information. But as we put here, it's quite complicated. So obviously Google says that buying and selling links is prohibited and it will result in a penalty. Okay, so basically why they're saying this is because there's two reasons. One is because paid links actually work to rank organic sites. So if Google says not to do something, it's usually because it works. Okay, so this is why Google developed their Penguin algorithm update, and essentially one of the reasons why link spam is decreasing, because they have so much fear around this if reported it can attract penalties element, that basically SEO companies and competitors are reporting sites without even looking at link profiles, just to see if potentially they are or not. Okay, and it's not all bad though, because it does keep the playing field relatively even. So if Google didn't say anything at all about paid links, it would be whoever had the largest budget won. Okay, so it does make sense that Google is slightly against this medium because part one, it keeps the playing field a little bit more even, although not by much. And secondly, it's seen as against their terms of service, so there is always that risk of a penalty. So larger businesses are not actively going to go out and do paid link building campaigns. Although you do even hear about large companies like BMW a few years ago doing these paid linking campaigns. And they did get hit with a penalty in the end. And it wasn't obviously site-wide, but it was relatively large amount of organic traffic that was hit. So essentially, this is how you can approach it. So you've probably heard these terminologies before, but you've got white hat link building, gray hat, and black hat. Okay, so this is with the white hat link building, this is what you ideally want if you are a larger, sustainable, scalable business. Okay, so these are strategies such as outreach, resource link building, broken link building, and although it used to be guest posts, this is treading more into the gray hat area. Okay, so gray hat link building it's not recommended if you don't know how to achieve it. So these are things like link insertions, these are things like guest posts, sponsorship links, scholarship links, things that Google has stated they are kind of in the middle. When done in the correct business philosophy way, then it's fine. But if you do anything with the goal just to achieve the link, then that's seen as artificial and against Google's terms of service. Now, whether you think that's correct or not, at the end of the day, we are playing their game, so we do have to make a decision and weigh the risk versus the reward. And then you've got the black hat link building. It's a no-go if you have a client, but honestly, if you need to know about this sort of stuff to leverage and understand what works. So we do a lot of black hat link building testing on our own personal domains, and it enables us to see what actually moves the needle in terms of organic rankings, but never do it on a site that you are fearful of losing. So if that site gets de-indexed or penalized, then be okay with that. And otherwise, just don't go near the black hat stuff for a client site or for essentially a business website that you're doing link building for. So here's why you should get obsessed with these. Now, relevancy is always king, but if you can have a high enough DA, relevancy takes a second seat. So for example, what I mean by this is if you have an editorial link from, say, the BBC or the Times or the New York Times, the New York Times is a news website, so it has topics of all different things. And if you are in the business department, but you have a food blog, for example, although it's relevant to the article that obviously that person or that editor or that contributor will be writing about, it's actually not the most relevant link in the world because it's not from a food blogger, it's not from a restaurant or anything like that. So the relevancy is lower, but the domain authority is so high and the authority of that overall site, and usually the page URL as well, is going to be very high. And as a result, in our opinion, that's a better link. We've seen that moves the organic rankings needle a lot further and a lot faster as well. And it just builds a massive amount of trust because you can approach a food blogger and say to them, hey, can we pay you X amount of money for a link? And maybe about 20-50% of the time, they're going to say yes for that. And as a result, that barrier to entry is not very high. Whereas if you think about editorials, you can't approach a contributor at Forbes, or they're going to cost a lot more if you could decide to do that. And as a result, there's less of it, so there's less saturation. So essentially the barriers to entry are higher. So that link is worth a lot more. So here's how to go about it. Now we have a guide on local link building, so I'm only going to go through this very quickly. But one of the things you can do is actually sponsor local events, clubs, teams, and organizations. Okay, so Google has said that when you sponsor an event, you should always have a no-follow link if it's obviously a linking one. What we've seen is that even if you sponsor a charity or a local sports team, they are very rarely going to actually no-follow this link. And although there is a slight risk that if you get a manual review of your website, Google might say that this was purchased in the only way to generate a link to your website, and it should be a no-follow link. At the end of the day, it's out of our control because we don't own the website. So this is a really good way that we've essentially built up links for clients in the local space. Another one is digital posts and digital PR, and guest posts. So guest posts are seen as grey hat when they're not done correctly. If you have a look at this, you can see that we're just sponsoring an article and we're writing something and there's only a link bio. So we're not doing anything wrong, we're just saying where we're from. And as long as the in-contextual links that you have in the article themselves aren't spammy and don't contain exact match anchors, you're not going to get hit for this, especially when the article themselves, the post itself is very high quality and actually adds value to the user. That's all Google's looking for, value creation. Then another one, you've got working with influencers and bloggers. So for example, we want to approach a website and say, okay, we'll send you a product. If you're happy to review it, then let us know. If you send the product for free, then that's actually okay with Google because you're not paying for the link itself. Obviously, there is that value exchange element as well. But usually, you're going to actually pay an additional fee as well. And this is basically classed as influencer marketing nowadays. But it's incredibly effective at actually generating a lot of social proof and a lot of referral traffic very quickly too. And you'll obviously get the benefit of the link. But if you don't specifically ask for it, you also reduce your likelihood of achieving a penalty. And then finally, you can bring an expert on board. So if you'd like to get in touch with us, we have a lot of content on the site that helps a lot of people. Have a look at ghostmarketing.co.uk, and then you can see the link there if you'd like to get in touch with us directly. Okay, cheers. If you have any questions, again, feel free to contact me at tom@ghostmarketing.co.uk, and you can see the full post in a bit more detail at this URL. Okay, thank you.